I'll have the bacon cheeseburger.
Got it. That'll be right up.
Oh, man. I wish I would have gotten that. You know what to do. Audible. Chicken wing, chicken wing, chicken wing. 42, 42.
I got you, Rocco.
There's nothing better than getting what you want, and Sweet Caroline's Kitchen and Cocktails has everything you want. Great burgers, sandwiches, wings, and more. Call an audible on your next meal out. Sweet Caroline's Kitchen and Cocktails, Ames.
A fuel choice that even rivals can agree on? Now that's worth the hype. Pump it up with Unleaded 88.
Welcome in to the Channel Seed Studios. This is Bigger Than 12 on the Iowa Everywhere Podcast Network. I am Jake Brend here in Des Moines, Iowa, joined by Derek Duke down in Texas. Derek, how's it going, man?
Jake, doing fantastic. Another great weekend of 14 plus hours of Big 12 football. Just telling you guys about that. I watched from 11 a.m. till 1:30 a.m. Central Time. Jake, I got to ask you, man, was there an important game of the state of Iowa this past weekend?
Dude, Drake went on the road, a non-scholarship program, beat Eastern Washington, an FCS all-scholarship program. Monumental. Actually, like, seriously, that's actually a huge win.
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah.
I didn't know if you were joking or not.
Well, tongue-in-cheek. But yes, there was a massive game on the national stage that happened in Iowa. The Cyclones go on the road and beat the Hawkeyes 20-19. And I never doubted for a second. I don't know if really any Iowa State fans did, but
oh, come on. I think Hassel and I were probably the only guys to pick Iowa State or had the courage to pick Iowa State in this game. But in all seriousness, I hope Cyclones fan, they stay hydrated after the celebration. I even joined the party myself on Saturday, had a few cold ones. And I will say the Hooray for Ames song, Damn You Matt Van Winkle, was stuck in my head all weekend long.
Well, don't bring it up because I don't want it stuck in my head. I've learned how to avoid that video at all costs.
I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape it on Twitter. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, to discover that for the first time. Oh, that's brutal. But it's definitely made its rounds around the state of Iowa. And yeah, hooray, I guess. Iowa State winners in Kinnick Stadium. Before we get into today's 12 and 12, I'd like to thank our new sponsor. Our new partner, Freedom Tire. Got Quentin Crowner and all of the Freedom Tire team and employees. There's a lot of them throughout central Iowa, and they love supporting locally owned and family-owned businesses that we have right here at Iowa Everywhere, and we're really, really, really excited to welcome them to the long list of partners that we've got here at Iowa Everywhere. Freedom Tire has been locally and family-owned for nearly 50 years. If Iowa Everywhere could reach half that, that'd be awesome. 50 years is impressive. They're your home for new tires and then vehicle maintenance and repairs for every major brand. And then, it's that time of year. The roads are about to start getting bad up here. Potholes will be coming. So you can prevent any problems with your car over at Freedom Tire. They're backed by experts that can get your vehicle back to the safe and sound performance with commitment to honesty and integrity. Just one of the many core values that they strive for there at Freedom Tire. You can find locations anywhere in Altoona, Ames, Fleur Drive in Des Moines, West Des Moines, and over there in Urbandale on Hickman. Or you can go to freedomtire.com. We are very, very, very thankful that they are a part of the program now.
Shout out
goes
to
really
Freedom
well.
Tire.
Goes really well with this program because, like freedom, we've kind of got the freedom to do whatever we want and talk about whatever we want to. And we've got 12 topics, 12 questions relating to the Big 12 that we're going to dive into this week. We're going to start this off the same every single week. We're going to go, who was the most impressive team from week 2 in the Big 12, Derek?
I think there's an obvious one we kind of just talked about in the intro there, but I'm going to save that one for later. For me, it was Arizona State. Once again, I talked about them last week on the show, but damn, are they impressive. They beat Mississippi State 30-23. And they did it by running the football and playing great defense. And I absolutely love that. Sun Devils ran for over 350 yards. 𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 was named National Player of the Week, so shout out to him. He ran for over 250 yards in that ball game. Defense, get this one. Defense gave up only 3 third downs and less than 300 yards of offense. And guess what? It's always nice to stick it to the almighty SEC, as we know.
Yeah, I think 𝗙𝗹𝗹𝗍 is my new favorite. He might be my new favorite player in the Big 12. That guy is awesome.
Cool name,
I
too.
caught that game live. I caught the fourth quarter live, went back and rewatched it. But so Mississippi State climbed back into that game, cut it to 7.
They did.
It was getting really dicey, and he just broke loose that run into the red zone, and it was incredible to ice the game. That guy is a fun player. I'm going to go, we already talked about it, Iowa State. The biggest win of the week for the Big 12 to go in to a Big 10 opponent's house and beat them. This game has been broken down in every single way possible, but you just can't give enough credit to Iowa State, to Matt Campbell, to Rocco Beck, to Kyle Conradi, just with the amount of adversity they faced. I was there. I'm in that north end zone. I have been in there. I think back to that South Dakota State game a couple of years ago, the Michigan State game last year, the Iowa State game this year. That wall it's comparable to Hilton Coliseum. For Iowa State fans that have been there, that is how deafening it is. And when you see Tyler Perkins not being able to catch a snap cleanly, or Jared Hufford, his hand shaking, like, it is genuinely so loud. So to overcome pretty much the worst case of scenario to start the game, it was so impressive. And now, I mean, Matt Campbell's won back-to-back games at Kinnick Stadium. I know he still struggled with the game at home, but he might have figured out something on how to beat Iowa, and it was kind of just let their quarterback let the game go. That was kind of the strategy, it seemed like.
No, for sure, man. I agree 100% with that. It was a great showing by Iowa State, and just what a win. I mean, that you can really, there's no more you can say about it, but what a win. Of course, here at Iowa Everywhere Network, we're going to have the full breakdown of that game across multiple shows, I'm sure. So you can definitely check that out. Now, on the flip side of that, Jake, who was your most disappointing Big 12 team of the week?
It's Kansas, and we'll get into it more in depth in just a little bit, but I was not impressed at all with Jalen Daniels, and I am concerned about their offense without their offensive coordinator, 𝗙𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. The running attack still looked really good between Devin Neal and I'm blanking on the second guy, but 𝗙𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃.
Daniel
but
Hishaw.
For Daniels to give the game away like that, essentially, really, really disappointing. And that's one of those games that the Big 12 has to have from a perception standpoint. It's not like Texas Tech going and losing to Washington State. Texas Tech is not thought of as a contender in the Big 12. Kansas is thought of as a contender in the Big 12. They're ranked. You have to go and beat those middling Big 10 teams on the road, and they didn't. Very disappointing.
For sure. I'm going to go with Cincinnati here, and we haven't really talked much about the Bearcats on this show yet, but I'm going to shine a spotlight on them, probably one that they don't want on them right now, but lost to Pittsburgh 28-27, and you're probably looking at the final score and like, that's actually a pretty close game. Well, Cincinnati had a 27-6 lead late in the third quarter before giving up 22 unanswered points. Offense completely folded up like a cheap tent late. Defense couldn't stop anything either. It was an ugly, ugly loss for the Bearcats. This is one of those games for me that could put a coach like Scott Satterfield on the hot seat. And to be honest, I wasn't a fan of his hire to begin with. So this is one of those losses to me that is just going to kind of add another stick to the fire, for me at least. I don't know about the rest of the fan base or how people at Cincinnati feel, but I think you can definitely start questioning the job he's been doing so far at Cincinnati. And, you know, obviously they got a long season ahead of them, so we'll see what happens, but definitely not a good look for Cincinnati and Scott Satterfield on Saturday.
Yeah, we can talk all we want about the significance or the lack thereof for bowl games. But at the end of the day, being a 500 team matters. And for a team like Cincinnati, it's going to be really hard to get to 6 wins in this league, I think. they're in that group of probably 5 to 7 teams in the conference that will be in that 4-8 to 6-6 range. And when you enter the fourth quarter or the end of the third quarter with a 21-point lead to a Power 5 team, you just can't lose that. And you're right, those are the types of games that can get a coach's seat warm. And again, this Cincinnati program was in a college football playoff 3 years ago. So these fans probably still feel the thrill of that and the ramifications of that. And to be a 1-1 team and then coming off of I believe they're 4-8 last season, those fans can't be too happy over there eating their Skyline chili.
Absolutely not.
So a team that very well could have been in that last category had they not pulled it off, Oklahoma State just played a thriller against Arkansas, one of the craziest games of the weekend. I've got a question for you, Derek.
Shoot.
Can Alan Bowman just go the whole season without screwing it up for the Pokes?
For Oklahoma State's title hopes, I'd hope not, because he certainly played a big part of them getting in an early hole. Bowman was awful in that first half against Arkansas. The offense went scoreless, and the only points they got in that first half came off a pick six, thankfully for them. At halftime, Bowman, 50% of completion percentage, 64 yards, and interception. I made sure to write that down once I saw that stat at halftime because it just stuck with me. He did play better in the second half. I'll give him that, outside of that unsportsmanlike conduct penalty where he was doing the finger guns towards the Arkansas sideline. I thought it was kind of funny.
Stupid.
I'm not going to lie to you. It was stupid. It was stupid, but I did think it was kind of funny. Honestly, I'm not only concerned about Bowman, I'm also worried about that running game of theirs. Ollie Gordon was not a factor in that game. They ran for just 60 yards. And to me, that's not good enough. And especially on the broadcast, they were talking about Oklahoma State's line being the most experienced in college football. And to me, they certainly did not look like one on Saturday against Arkansas.
So you mentioned he played better in the second half, which I agree with. But rewatching the game, so there was the flea flicker that got them down inside the 10. And then the very next throw, there was that quick slant. Should have been picked. One of the worst throws I've ever seen. Not a bad decision, just he missed a quick slant by 3 or 4 yards. It hit the Arkansas defender right in the chest and was dropped, fortunately. If that ball is intercepted, game probably over. So I agree with you. I said it on the show last week that I think I was switching my pick for Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. I put my money where my mouth is. I placed a few bucks on that to happen. And I did not feel good about it watching it in the Kinnick Stadium press room on Saturday morning. Here's another stat for you. So Bowman, last season, the Pokes played, I believe, 13, maybe 14 games. Yeah, 14 with the Big 12 championship. He threw 2+ picks in 4 of those games. That is unacceptable. And by that math, he's probably going to do close to the same this year. And it didn't cost them on Saturday. It should have. But if he has a few more of those games where he's inaccurate, making bad decisions, it will cost Oklahoma State. And I'm also worried about their defense, but that can probably be a talking point for another show because they got torched, and they are very fortunate that Arkansas gave them that game. Another game that was going on at the same time as this one, they kind of go together, just being 2 of the 5 to 6 contenders in the Big 12, was K-State at Tulane. They were down in this game, a lot of it. They pulled it out, won by 7 on the road. But I think there's a lot to be worried about. Are you more worried about their defense long-term or Avery Johnson's progression as a quarterback?
I think at the moment, I would probably lean towards Avery Johnson, and I could probably be wavered anyway on that specific topic. But for me, their defense wasn't perfect in that game by any means, but the defense also won that game for them. They had a fumble return for a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. And then obviously at the end of the game, they had that goal line pick. You know, Avery Johnson, I've said it before, he's still a young quarterback. There's going to be ups and downs with him, like I've talked about many times on the show already. At times, though, I felt like the play calling is a little bit vanilla, a little bit bland for Kansas State. Maybe they're holding back for conference play. I'm not really sure about that. It's still early. Let's give Avery a little bit of time. Obviously, he's still young, so he's going to make mistakes. We're going to have to go through growing pains. I've said it time and time again before, but maybe they're holding back a bit. So I want to see more of Avery Johnson before I completely buy or sell on him yet. But it was certainly interesting to see all the hype surrounding him going in the offseason, like we've talked about and many others have talked about around the national media. But for me, I just give it a little bit of time for right now.
Yeah, there's definitely two sides to the coin. Are they keeping it vanilla because they want to keep it for the Big 12 season, or are they keeping it vanilla because they don't trust him yet? And I think I lean on the side of I don't think they completely trust him to go downfield yet, at least consistently. But again, I've made this point a few times on the show. They don't necessarily need him to be this dynamic passer downfield. DJ Giddens is so good. Hit him on that wheel route down the sidelines. So while I am concerned about Johnson's progression, especially this season, I think I'm going to go with the defense. They allowed 7.5 yards per play to Tulane. I know they got that scoop and score, but I credit that more to just a boneheaded play by that Tulane quarterback. It just concerns me really anytime a team is playing a group of 5 opponent. Granted, Tulane's been one of the better ones of the last half decade, but they couldn't stop him. 5 of 13 on third down. We saw how much that K-State defense struggled late last year, especially against Iowa State. I'm a little worried about Kansas State on that defensive side. And I think the Big 12 is slowly maybe moving back to that mid-2010s era where there's a lot of prolific offenses and not many defenses. They could struggle in that area. But this kind of goes to the point where it's survive and advance. For K-State and Oklahoma State, those were 2 games you couldn't lose. And the fact that they got out of there with wins, good long-term for the conference. And we'll see if they can figure those problems out before Big 12 play starts. But KU does not have an easy test on Saturday.
And I'll say this, Tulane also has got Kansas State's number. I mean, they beat them last year
Right.
in Manhattan, so they definitely have their number. Moving on to another quarterback that we're worried about for a different reason. Jake, can Utah quarterback Cam Rising make it healthy through this season?
Recent history would tell me no. It's week 2. He already hurt himself running into a Gatorade cooler. If you would have told me that was an Onion article before the season, I would have believed you. It's just this guy can't catch a break. He's hurt all the time. I'm not a doctor. I'm not around him. Has he made a glass? Whatever. Whatever I know is he has not stayed healthy in his 7 years as a quarterback. And I also know that when he's in there, Utah looks prolific. They would have beat Baylor by 50 if he played that whole game. Baylor could not stop him, and they need him because that Utah team is the runaway favorites in the conference if they have him. But if they don't, that conference is anybody's to take. What do you think?
I'll keep it simple. I mean, if Cam Rising can't make it through the season, then come December, Utah will be sitting at home during the Big 12 championship game. Zach Wilson's brother Isaac came in as Cam's backup, and as a true freshman, he simply was not ready, as you could see. So luckily for Utah, they were in control of that game. They're up 23-0 at halftime. Also, how was that hit on Cam Rising not a penalty? That was like surprising to me.
I don't know.
He got pushed into the water cooler like the water boy, like in the movie. Like somebody pushed him, just threw him right into the water cooler. But for me, it would be an absolute shame if Cam Rising doesn't stay healthy this season because I mean, quite frankly, their season depends on it. You saw what they looked like last year without him. I don't think Utah wants to do that again for another year. So make sure he's healthy, but I think he's going to be okay from what early reports seem, but we'll see throughout the week.
And it's a quick turnaround. They go to Stillwater in about 12 days, September 21st. So they will need him for that game because we're going to come across probably 7, 8, 9 of those games this year that are just turning points in the Big 12 season. And Utah at Oklahoma State might be the very first one that we get. And I would like their chances, goes without saying, I'd like their chances a lot more if they had Cam Rising. We already talked about them. Kansas lost at Illinois. What's going on with the Jayhawks, Derek?
We should change the question here. I thought about this. We should change the question from what's up with Kansas to what the hell is up with Jalen Daniels right now. Turn the ball over
It's
4
probably
times. Yeah, turn the ball over 4 times against Illinois and an ugly, ugly pick 6. He's thrown for more interceptions this year than touchdowns through 2 games. And he looks like an absolute
pick 6,
shell of himself.
That pick 6 was like 13 seconds left in the second quarter. It did not. That's one of those where if it's not there, you throw it away. You live to fight another day.
He just looks like a shell of himself. And he was missing open receivers. And to me, it looked like when I went back and watched some of it too, I had to go back and just see a couple snaps from him and throws. It just looked like he was always like a step behind mentally, physically, whatever it may be. And I started to wonder to myself, is he truly fully healthy right now? This is a guy that people, including myself at times, were talking about could lead Kansas maybe to a Big 12 title and possibly even get to New York for the Heisman. But right now, he does not look like that. He is holding them back right now, which is very surprising to me considering where he was 2 years ago. But again, I don't know if there's a health problem with him, but he certainly does not look like the player that I saw 2 years ago.
And he doesn't look the same with his legs either. And that adds just a whole nother element. That's what makes Kansas so dangerous, because you've got Devin Neal, you've got 𝗙liche, and then you've got Daniels with the legs. And he has been a good passer. He's proven that. He's proven to be a smart passer as well. He's up to 4 picks on the season, 3 on Saturday. That matches his career high. The most he's ever had in a season is 4. I don't know what's going on with him. I completely agree. I do want to give a little credit to those Illinois defensive backs. The broadcast did a really good job of pointing out how talented they are across the board in that defensive secondary. I know they had I'm blanking on the guy's name. They had a top 10 pick a couple years ago go to Seattle as a cornerback. So Illinois certainly had playmakers in the secondary, but again, even when he wasn't throwing picks, he was a second behind. He was throwing comebackers 3-4 yards off. It was just weird. And you're right, they lost that game because of him. Illinois did nothing, next to nothing on offense in that first half. KU should have been up 14-3 going into the locker room, and they should have left Champaign with a win.
I'll say this right now about Kansas to kind of end it here. I would say right now that Kansas is closer to missing out on a bowl game than they are making it to Arlington. With what I've seen so far from 2 weeks, I think that's really the case for them. Speaking of bowl games, Jake, will Colorado make a bowl game?
No. Do I have to expand? I'll expand. You got blown out at Nebraska. I don't know if you can read between the lines on what Shedeur Sanders said after the game. I think you could have taken it up either way, where he was saying like, yeah, Nebraska had it a lot better because they can run the ball. I kind of took it as, yeah, we can't run the ball. It's not my fault. Somebody else's fault. That team has a culture problem. They have a substance problem. They have really an everything problem outside of Travis Hunter. I don't think Coach Prime is going to be there next year. I would be more shocked if they made a bowl game than if they won 2 games. That's where I'm at with this program.
Yeah, I had to write about that game for the website on Heartland College Sports, and it was tough to get through, man. It was not easy to watch that game. Nebraska absolutely dominated the line of scrimmage. Sanders was running for his life. Once again, it's going to happen a lot this year. And you can get used to hearing that every week. Seriously, I'm being dead serious about that. I'm saying no. I think they'll finish around 5-7. I think they could maybe beat Colorado State looking at the schedule, Baylor, Cincinnati, maybe Texas Tech, and maybe Kansas with the way they're looking right now. They're going to upset somebody this year. I'm just not sure who it is. Right now, I would say, honestly, that there are more egos than anything in Boulder right now in that locker room. There's just more egos than anything. And when that happens, chaos happens. That's really what I say. So for me, I'm kind of with you, Jake. I don't think they're going to make a bowl game this year with the way they're looking.
And Sanders, yeah, he's probably a first-round pick. If I'm an NFL GM, I don't want him. If you're throwing guys under the bus, not taking the blame, not taking it on the chest, and then who made that throw backed up in your own end zone? Who threw to a curl route on the long side of the field?
Dumb.
Anyone who's played college football for 10 minutes this year on the Xbox knows you don't make that throw. That gets pick six every single time. And yeah, that's on Shedeur Sanders. Was it a bad play call? Absolutely. I don't know why you're even drawing up a curl route to that side of the field when you're backed up in your own end zone. But he made a poor throw. Nebraska capitalized. And if Nebraska wanted to, they could have beat him by 60. And that was embarrassing for Colorado. They're not making a bowl game. A school that has less buzz around it, but similar struggles. We go to Lubbock.
Ooh.
What the heck is wrong with Texas Tech?
Again, the better question is, what isn't wrong with Texas Tech right now? Baron Morton had his worst game against Washington State that I've ever seen. He struggled to find receivers, could not get in a rhythm. Now, I will say, to his credit, he is down 3 offensive linemen right now because he was already without one of his starters. He had 2 more go down in that game. Another thing for them, Taj Brooks, their star running back, didn't play yet. I thought they ran the ball pretty well and effectively. They averaged over 5 yards a carry in that game. And then it's just like Zach Kittley, their offensive coordinator, completely forgot about the run game. He completely went away from it. So to me, and then you look at the defensively, what they've had over the last 2 games, and it's like a box of chocolates. Like Forrest Gump said, you never know what you're going to get. One week, they're giving up 500 yards to Abilene Christian. And then the next, they're giving up over 300 yards to Washington State, and Washington State only completes 10 passes in the game, and they still win by double digits. So for me, they made Washington State's quarterback, John Mateer, they made him look like Johnny Football out there. If they don't get, and I'll say this, and I'm in with this, if they don't get things figured out in Lubbock, it's going to be a very long season there, and we could sit here next offseason asking ourselves if Joey McGuire and this staff is the right staff in place for Texas Tech going into 2025, because people are starting to get pissed in Lubbock. Like I saw so many fan reactions, so many videos this past weekend about them. He's starting to get on a side of Texas Tech fans that you don't want to get on.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down. I wrote down it seems like a coaching problem. 4 turnovers, should have been 5 on the punt at the 1 where I didn't write down the returner's name. But the returner with 6 or 7 defenders around him just jumped up and grabbed the ball. You never, ever do that as a punt returner. Ended up working out, but I just wrote down too much stupid stuff. 4 turnovers, so many penalties. That was not a well-coached team. That was not a team that was prepared to go on the road to a Washington State team that's going to struggle in this new landscape in college football. It's bad. And you mentioned it, Mateer only threw for 115 yards, and you lose by 21 points. That's the sign of a bad team. And I agree. If Brooks comes back and things don't look much better, there could be some uncomfortable questions, uncomfortable conversations for McGuire down there in Lubbock. I think it's safe to say that we didn't expect to be talking this much Arizona State 2 weeks into the program. Another big win, another impressive win for the Sun Devils. Are they for real?
You know, I've talked about them twice now, I think, in my most impressive teams, the Arizona State back-to-back weeks. So I wouldn't say that they're a Big 12 title contender, but they're not going to be an easy win on the schedule like we all thought they would be before the season started. And credit to head coach Kenny Dillingham. He's got that team going, and one could maybe argue right now at this very moment that they're the best power team in the state of Arizona, because the way Arizona's looking to, who we'll get to in a minute, but what they're doing, they're using it by an old school approach. I've talked about it before, running the football, playing sound fundamental defense. Quarterback Sam Levitt really hasn't had to do anything, so he still remains a question mark for to me at least. But when they are able to run the football the way they have been, they're going to be an extremely tough team to face. They almost remind me a little bit of UCF with the way they're able to run the football. Obviously, Sam Levitt's not KJ Jefferson in the run game, but still, you get what I'm saying here. I'm going to be very interested to see how their season plays out. If they can make a bowl game in this conference coming in here in year one, that would be huge. I think it might be a hot take on that, but if they make a bowl game or get to maybe even 7 wins or something crazy like that, I wouldn't hesitate maybe to put Kenny Dillingham as Big 12 Coach of the Year, just with the offseason and all the stuff that they've had to deal with the scholarships and all those kinds of things. I think he's done an outstanding job so far.
Week 3 is going to tell us a lot because Texas State is the best opponent they'll have played, and they've got to go to San Marcos. Is that how it's pronounced?
It's San Marcos.
San Marcos. Yeah. San Marcos. I had a buddy actually who lived there. He worked for Texas State. Not anymore. But yeah, Texas State, they're fighting for the college football playoff. I think they're probably the best group of 5 team there is. They're in that Boise State. I'm not throwing Liberty in there. Liberty sucks. Play one real team and go 12-0 and then get back to me. But we just saw Boise State lose to Oregon. I don't think they should be penalized for that. But if Texas State can make a statement win over a team that's been solid so far in the Big 12, that could be huge for them. And I know Texas State does not have a rich history. So safe to say it's going to be buzzing down there in Texas. I like what Arizona State's done yet. I'm not going to go as far to say they will make a bowl game yet, but you've got 2 wins out of the way, and that goes a long way. I'm going to pull up their schedule, just kind of look through it so far. It's honestly kind of tough. If they can get past Texas State, of course, you go 3-0, and then their 3 most winnable games are probably at Tech, BYU at home, and maybe UCF at home. So definitely a tough Big 12 slate. But you know how this league is, and with how they're running the football, kind of zigging when everybody else is zagging, that it could be a fun season down there in Tempe. And even if it's not, the future's bright with what he's done just in 4 or 5 months down there in Arizona.
For sure.
Let's not go too far.
Can happen. No, yeah. Anything can happen, man, in this conference. You never know. There's always a surprise team. Maybe they're that surprise team this year. Obviously not going to get to the Big 12 title game, but maybe they are one of those surprise teams this year. Staying in the state of Arizona, Jake, are you going to buy or sell stock in Arizona right now?
I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to buy. I'm going to buy pretty low. I'm going to take the advice of the stock market. Buy when a stock is low.
It's about as cheap as it's going to get right now.
It is, and that's why. I went back and rewatched their game against Northern Arizona. I can speak from experience as an Iowa State fan. When you play those FCS programs that are pretty good from your own state, there's just weird stuff that happens in that game. There's weird motivation. The NAU had a defensive back who was one of Brent Brennan's players for 3 years at San Jose State. There's motivation there. There's players that had been in the Arizona program, transferred there. Of course, there's going to be all those in-state guys that wanted to get recruited to go play at Arizona and didn't, playing with that chip on their shoulder. So I try to never take too much from those games, but it was still really weird. A lot of penalties. They got down in the red zone and ended up kicking a field goal from like the 25. Just a not clean football game whatsoever. But they dominated the second half, and I don't think the score indicates that. So what I felt about Arizona last week, I'm going to still try and think that exact same way. McMillan is not going to have 2 catches in a game another time this entire season. Fafita just looked off, really, for the first time that I've ever watched him. I think they'll be a lot better, and they, of course, have a huge game on Friday. So I'm going to buy the Wildcats.
I'm doing the opposite.
Probably didn't expect that, did you?
No, I did not expect that. I'm selling. I've told you guys before during the offseason, episode 1 of this show, that they were my most overrated team in the Big 12. And I think they proved my point in the first 2 games against New Mexico and Northern Arizona. Against New Mexico, they struggled to stop the run, and their offense lit it up. And then against Northern Arizona, it was kind of the opposite. The defense stepped up while the offense struggled. So for me, they're kind of a mixed bag right now. The one thing I really noticed last weekend, I thought they struggled to protect Noah Fifita, and that's against Northern Arizona. So what's going to happen when he's going to going up against some of these other teams in the Big 12? Can their defense hold up? That's another question mark for me that this Northern Arizona game did not answer for me. So I'm still out on Arizona right now. I'm not going to buy them whatsoever. And don't get me wrong, I like Fifita and I like McMillan as a receiver, but there's just too many question marks elsewhere on that team for me to buy in right now.
Yeah, I can't quit their weapons. It's a bad habit. It's
fun.
probably going to burn me.
They're fun.
They are fun. It just feels like even without McMillan, feels like anyone that touches the ball is dynamic. And we'll see where that gets them in the Big 12. But yeah, that O-line, especially there in the second quarter, really, really concerning. They were missing their top running back as well. Let's go to the bottom of the Big 12, or at least we think to be the bottom of the Big 12. Who finishes higher, BYU or Houston?
Two more teams we haven't talked about a ton on this show, but I thought we had to squeeze them in here somehow after their performances this weekend. And I've been back and forth on this one. This was probably one of the tougher questions we have on this slate. And for me, this is like picking between eating broccoli and cauliflower. And for the record, I hate both of them. I would puke on the spot if I ate either one of those.
Broccoli.
I would puke on the spot if I ate either one of those. And sometimes I honestly feel like doing the same when I have to watch these two offenses play. With that said, I think I would lean BYU right now. Houston, don't get me wrong, they did almost pull off the upset thanks to their defense, but their offense is just so bad. Donovan Smith is not playing well, and through 2 games, their offense is averaging less than 1.5 yards per carry. Meanwhile, BYU's kind of in a similar position. Like, they beat SMU, which was great, and their defense was awesome, but that offense is just so bad. It's just as bad as Houston's. I don't think Jake Retzloff is the guy to lead that team to a bunch of wins. He is going to have to be a good game manager, and I don't think he's capable of doing that without turning the ball over. Neither is Donovan Smith, for that matter. So, again, I'll lean BYU, but I do not feel confident in that whatsoever.
Yeah, BYU should have beat SMU by 3 or 4 touchdowns. The amount of field goals they had to settle for in that first half when they were dominating the game. Yeah, I agree with you. We're scraping bottom of the barrel here. I'll go BYU just because, I mean, they were close last year. They won 5 games. And that home atmosphere is a real advantage, whereas Houston doesn't really have a home field advantage. And then I think I've got the tiebreaker of it all. They closed the season against each other. That's out in Provo. I would like the Cougs in that game. Oh wait, they're both Cougars.
They are.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, I like the Cougars in that game. I think the Cougars will finish higher than the Cougars. But yeah, BYU. Give me
I just hope I don't draw the short straw on our staff over there at the website to get that game, because I would rather pour hot sauce in my eyes than have to watch those two play on offense. I'm serious about that. So let's change topics here. We got to change topics here. Jake, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we're going to go about as broad stroke as we possibly can. Was it a good week for the Big 12?
For me, it was sloppy at times, and we had some really close calls, obviously with Arkansas and Tulane. But in this sport, winning is all that matters. And the conference went 1-1 against the ACC, 2-1 against the almighty SEC, and then you beat a ranked Big 10 team on the road. It was a decent weekend. It could have definitely been better. I think the Kansas game obviously was kind of one of the nails in the side of the hip there, because if they would have won that game, that completely, to me, changes the narrative of the weekend. But when you think about it, though, your top contenders in the conference are still unbeaten, unlike the ACC. And this thing about this weekend too, and I thought about it going into week 3, this is really the final weekend to make statements out of conference. We have teams playing each other like Kansas State and Arizona that are playing each other in non-conference matchups this weekend, although they're in the same conference. I would personally rather go out and play teams from other conferences, but I also know that these schedules were made years in advance. So really nothing we can do about it, which really sucks. But I just wish that we could get more opportunities against teams, in the Big 10, in the ACC, in the SEC to, kind of get some more national respect, especially from that playoff committee who's watching.
I don't know what the word would be, but if we stick to the letter of the law, which is the question, was it a good week for the Big 12? I'm going to say no. I think the conference treaded water this week. Oklahoma State and K-State were really, really close to this week being a disaster. But Iowa State going into Iowa City and winning, Utah making a pretty loud statement, and you got a couple of those lower level wins, your Arizona States, your BYUs. I think it was a decent week for the Big 12, but I agree. If KU would have won that game at Illinois, I would say it was a good week, but it's treading water. And now we bring in our producer, Aiden Wyatt. After our 12 and 12, we did it in about 40 minutes today. New record. And Aiden's got a trivia question related to the state of Iowa. And we have no idea.
Jake, I think you're gonna know this one, but obviously this is for Derek. Which largest cereal company in the world? I don't know why it says which largest cereal company in the world. The largest cereal company in the world makes its home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Yeah, I got it.
Is it General
I don't
Mills?
feel stupid.
No, it's not General Mills.
No.
Quaker.
Yep. Quaker Oats.
The city.
Derek, if you ever drive through Cedar Rapids, you'll understand why it was such an easy question. There's a giant neon sign. Yeah, and it smells like Quaker Oats all the time.
You know,
But
honestly,
one day a week.
I have not. Yeah, I haven't been through. That's the one part of Iowa. Well, I guess you could say Southern Iowa or Northern. I've only really been through Des Moines, Ames, and then everything kind of west of that. I have not been east of Des Moines. I don't think ever, or really north for that matter either. So there's no way I would have guessed that. And
No, I didn't think so.
Well,
Unless you were a
glad I
Quaker
didn't
Oats
make a-
connoisseur, I did not expect you to get that one.
No.
I'm glad I didn't make a fool out of myself like I did last week. 1 for 3, baby. 1 for 3 on the year.
Not bad.
Well,
not bad.
Are you going to crack a cold one for the Cyclones, Derek?
I'm
already-
going to crack one.
I already
I'm
cracked
gonna
a
crack one.
nondescript energy drink. It's been a long week. Really long week. Really good week. Of course, Saturday was a decent day. There's
A decent one.
yeah, no, it was.
You were
it was-
jumping.
it was
I know
really
y'all.
fun.
Half the staff over here at Iowa, everywhere, was jumping for joy, and the other half was just burying themselves in sorrows. I guarantee it.
Well, we've waited long enough. We're not going to go fully into the Cyhawk game. I think it's been broken down enough, even literally on this program, but across all programs on Iowa everywhere. Encourage you to check out all the good work that our partners here have done. Let's move forward. Is Iowa State a legitimate Big 12 title contender? And that, of course, would mean they are a college football playoff contender.
And, if we're asking that question, that's like asking me, is water wet? Hell yes, they're a contender, and I thought they were before the season. I had Iowa State in my top 5 before the season. I made a bold prediction on this show that they would win 10 games for the first time in school history, and I'm sticking with that. I think defensively, they're good enough to compete with anybody in the Big 12 right now. And if you really sit back and think about the offenses we've seen so far through the first 2 weeks of the year, is there any offense to you that scares you, really, seriously and truly? Maybe Utah, Arizona, Kansas State still hasn't quite figured things out. You can make an argument too right now that the best offense resides in Ames, Iowa, with the way things have been going for me. Obviously Rocco in this game this past weekend struggled a little bit in the first half, but then, man, he lit it up. And Iowa's defense is no scrub. He lit it up against a really good defense in a very extremely tough environment. Jake, you know that firsthand. And to me, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel are the best receiver duo in the Big 12. And going back to Rocco, we talked about this last week on the show, and that made me look like a fool. But I think after that, I think I have to put him in the top 3 in the conference, especially after the way I've seen Jalen Daniels and Shedeur Sanders with the way they've been playing. So for me, I think Rocco's definitely in that conversation. And then finally, looking at the schedule here, if they take care of Arkansas State, they get Houston and Baylor after that. So to me, those are 3 wins that should come fairly easily. And then you get you go off to a 5-0 start, which is you can start to get this thing really rolling. That trip to Morgantown after that's going to be huge for this team. But I mean, once you get past, if they're able to get past the Mountaineers, I don't see Kansas anymore as a big threat as I once did, which means their chances of getting to Arlington are probably going to come down to those last 2 weeks when they play Utah and Kansas State. So this season is really, the schedule setting up very nicely for them and the way things are going to get rolling for them. If they're able to win some of these games and get hot, I mean, watch out for this team. Like I just mentioned, I don't think there's any offense better in the Big 12 than what Iowa State has right now. And like I said, on the flip side, defensively, they're playing great. Their defensive line can hold up against anybody in the Big 12. And again, who in this conference scares you offensively outside of maybe Utah? Like I just can't put it together. And last but not least, I want to say this before I stop with the Iowa State talk. Cheers, and we need to crack one here for 𝗙elle the freshman kicker. Absolutely outstanding. And the call by John Walters was absolutely cinematic.
Oh, it was so good.
That play alone belongs in Iowa State football history books because it was one of the best plays in Iowa State football history because it was just so awesome. What a great moment.
Yeah, you said a lot right there, and I don't disagree with any of it. You mentioned the schedule. I think I'm comfortable saying this. It sounds a little outlandish, but I think it would be a disappointment if Iowa State had more than one loss heading out to Salt Lake City. Because there's no loss on that schedule that you write in pen. I think at this point I'd probably write a loss in Morgantown and pencil, but we saw what Penn State did this week against Bowling Green. That dominant win all of a sudden looks a little bit worse for West Virginia. I said it before the year. I think Neil Brown will end with the seat warm under him. I don't think that's just a game that you chalk up as a loss for Iowa State, especially if you don't count the Liberty Bowl, which I don't because bowl games are not supposed to be played on another team's home field. If you don't count the Liberty Bowl, Iowa State has won 5 road games in a row with Rocco Becht as a starter, dating back to their loss in Norman last year. So that West Virginia game, you're probably looking at a pick 'em, something like that. And then it's you're home against UCF, you're home against Texas Tech, you're home-ish at a neutral field against Kansas, but Iowa State will have more fans there. I think it's reasonable and not insane to say that Iowa State could have 1 or 0 losses heading out to Salt Lake City. And then at that point, split Utah K-State, that's a 10-win season. And that sounds crazy because this program has never achieved 10 wins, but I completely agree with you. With where Iowa State stands, it is such a unique perspective because over the course of the Campbell era, there has been one steady thing, and that has been the defense. And that has been John Haycock, the professor. Where there's been ups and downs, it hasn't necessarily been offensive talent, more so offensive play calling and offensive line play. I'll say I like where the offensive line is heading. They've been good in pass protection literally the day since Ryan Clanton got there. Only given up 1 sack against Iowa, 0 last year against Iowa. That's impressive. And honestly, the run blocking wasn't bad against Iowa. There was a couple runs where Abu Sama fought a 2-yard run to a 6-yard run. So if the line can progress from probably a C- right now to maybe a B- by the end of the season, which is where I'd say they were back in 2020, I agree with you. The sky's the limit. And then the question is the defense. And if the question's the defense, is there a person you trust more in the Big 12 to figure it out than John Haycock?
Nope.
If there is, it can't be a longer list than 2 or 3 guys. So I agree with you. And above all else, you can talk X's, O's, you can talk playmakers, you can talk Rocco Becht. What shined in that Cyhawk game was the culture under Matt Campbell. To be down at halftime like they have been before, dead for rights, and to come back in a raucous environment and steal the soul out of another team, that has been the MO of this Iowa State program for the last 7 years under Matt Campbell. And when they've got their swagger and when they've got the ability to utilize Jaden Higgins, Jalen Nolan space, and hopefully that eventually opens up running lanes for Abu Sama, it could be a special season in Ames. So that's a long-winded answer to say, hell yeah, Iowa State is a contender in the Big 12.
No, for sure,
But-
man. I'm thrilled about what could happen this season with them, and I don't look as much of an idiot as I did maybe when I predicted that, but I think now people are starting to really get on board with this team.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Now, again, there's going to be a lot of close games. You can chalk up UCF as a win in pencil, but again, that's a run-heavy team, and we'll talk more about that once that week comes. Just an example, but we're going to bring Aiden in, and one of us, I know it. This is the week. One of us is going to get this random Big 12 quarterback right. This is the week, Aiden. Who do we have? Got a few clues for us?
All right. I was trying to think how to maneuver this because I think there's one hint that would really give it away. So I'm going to avoid that until you guys absolutely need it. All right. He played in his home state in college. His first year as a starter, his team was third in the country in scoring, but they only won 8-5. The third hint is the school he played for has a similar hand signal to another school in the Big 12.
Okay.
And by similar, I mean it's the exact same one.
Okay, so I already know what two schools those are. Okay. Okay, you're gonna have to repeat those first two again. He played second-ranked offense in the country, scoring offense.
Correct. Third scoring
Third,
offense in the
okay.
country. In his first year as a starter.
And 8. Oh gosh.
Is it Baker Mayfield?
No.
Oh.
I'll
I'm stuck on the hand signals thing. I'm going to feel really dumb.
It's Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. Those are the two. It's one of those schools.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. And there's no telling because when Cliff was there, that thing was rolling. But also Oklahoma State's had some years where they're rolling offensively. And home state, if I had to guess, it's probably not Oklahoma. It'd be a Texas quarterback. So I'm probably going to say it's a Texas Tech quarterback. The problem is I just don't know which Texas Tech quarterback it is. Gosh. Is it in the last 10 years or no?
No, just outside of the last 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Do you guys want the fourth hint? It's going to give it away, I think.
I got to go to the depths of
I have to have like a time. I think I got to have like a time frame on that one. So is it from like 2005 to 2010? Is it in that time frame?
His freshman year was 2010.
Oh gosh.
All right, final clue here. He backed up a New York Yankee.
Oh, so I was wrong. I was wrong. It's Brandon Whedon then, right? No?
No, he backed up Whedon.
Oh, he backed up Whedon.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
For the first 2 years of his career.
I have a guess, but I don't think it's right. It'd be like Clint Shelf.
It is.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I didn't know he was from the state of Oklahoma. So
yeah, he's an Enid native.
Okay. Okay. No disrespect to Oklahoma. I'm sorry. I know I got a lot of friends in Oklahoma.
Well, it was logical sense. I didn't think about that if a quarterback's playing in their home state, given how large Texas is and how many schools there are in Texas.
Exactly. And then the offensively, they've both been so good for such a long period of time. So like that hint right there didn't really help me. So but once you said he backed it up, and I was like, okay, so I know it was between 2010, 2014 when Whedon was there.
So his juniors and senior years, 2012 and 2013 at Oklahoma State is when he actually started.
Because I think he was the one. There's a clip out there of him running against Texas Tech back in like 2012-ish, maybe. and it was one where Gus Johnson said he's got get away from the cop speed. That was Clint Shelf running
Okay.
against Texas Tech. He ran for like 60 yards against Texas Tech in Lubbock, and he's like, he's got get away from the cop speed, and that was Gus Johnson. I'll never forget that call. That's why I remember Clint Shelf. Yeah, definitely
There you
a
go.
first quarterback.
Clint Shelf,
Finally.
yeah. So he would have been starting quarterback for that Iowa State game in Stillwater, where I think they crossed the goal line twice. In replay review, said they
EJ Bibbs
It was
game.
it was like, yeah, literally every Iowa State Oklahoma State game in the last decade has been insane.
Yeah, Clint
But
Clint
I'm
was
thinking
definitely
it was like
not a throwing
right before the
quarterback.
half.
He was definitely a run first
Yeah.
quarterback. I think they even had packages for him, if I remember correctly, of him just running the football near the goal line.
Man, that's
He had 7 rushing
I do remember
touchdowns
that
as a
guy.
senior.
Yeah, sounds about right.
how many?
Yeah, there you go. 7.
7. Okay, yeah. Well, let's get into our week 3 picks here on Iowa Everywhere. Again, we've got 5 games picked out. I had a rough week. I kind of got screwed last week. I can't lie. I went 1-4. Baylor backdoored cover. There was no way that game was less than 14, and then stupid Arkansas. They missed that field goal at the end of regulation. The under hits. Man, that's why gambling's stupid. Just a backdoor cover and a few feet away from a positive week. But I went 1-4, and I'm hoping to get back. Derek went 3-2. Is that
3-2.
correct?
Yes, I had a
3-2.
decent weekend. I think I'm even now for the season, so still need to got some work to do.
I need a big week to get back to even. So we're going to start the game we already talked quite a bit about. Arizona State goes to Texas State. And this line, as of about an hour ago, has dropped to just 1.5 is what the Sun Devils are favored by on the road, with an over-under set at 58.5. I'm going to go with the over. That line is so fishy. Way too fishy for me to play either way. Like, if you'd have told me Arizona State's favored by 5, I'm probably going to play the Sun Devils. But when you tell me it's that close to a pick'em, Vegas knows something. Neither of these teams have gotten too many stops these first couple weeks. I think both offenses are pretty good. And, you know what happens when these Power 5 teams go on the road to a Group of 5 team. I think there's going to be enough points scored, and I think it's going to be a close enough game to where it's kind of a shootout in the fourth quarter. And I think the over of 58.5 hits.
Jake, I'm actually excited to talk about this one because I'm actually going to be at the game watching
really?
this game with my wife. She is I got to give her a shout out. She's a Texas State alum and a former athlete there. I also lived in San Marcos. Yeah, eat them up. I also lived in San Marcos for a few years. I spent many nights at the Green Parrot drinking cheap well drinks. I lost so many brain cells at that place. It's not even funny. With that said, I'd like to keep my balls. So I'm going to go an alternative route here, and I'm not going to pick who covers or who wins. I am going to say that the under hits. It's going to go under 58 thanks to Arizona State's defense. So
Head to
I'm
head.
taking, yeah. I'm taking the under.
Isn't that line just so fishy though?
It's concerning because Texas State, I've seen them a little bit, and they definitely have some offensive firepower that they haven't had over the last few years. Under Kenny. But then Arizona State's defense is pretty damn good. Like what they did to Mississippi State was no joke. But going into a road environment, I'm not sure how they're going to handle it, but I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I'm taking the under.
And this probably has to be the biggest game in the history of that program, right? I know they beat Baylor last year, but there weren't really any legit playoff conversations happening in that building last year. I can't imagine. So the fact that it's a conversation this year, it's a game they have to have.
I can remember a couple years ago, actually, Texas State played Houston back when they had I can't even think of his name anymore. The quarterback, they were like number 3 or 4 or 5 in the country. It was like
the Tom Herman era.
The Tom Herman era. Houston, they came through Texas State and they blew the doors off of him. But that we'll leave that behind. So moving on, this one, Jake. This is a very interesting one. Non-conference matchup between two teams that are in the same conference. Arizona at Kansas State. Kansas State is favored by 7.5. The over-under set at 56.5. Jake, who you got for this one?
You already heard me buy Arizona. And if I'm buying Arizona, I got to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to take the points. Arizona's getting a touchdown plus the hook. K-State hasn't given me a reason yet for me to believe that they'd be able to beat a ranked top 25 opponent by more than 7 points. I think it's that simple. I think the over would actually be a safe play here as well, too. But I'm going to take Arizona plus the points, and I'll probably sprinkle a little money line in real life as well.
I'm going against you once again. This is by far the toughest test either team has faced this season.
Yep.
Although you can definitely make an argument for Tulane and Kansas State. After watching Arizona State struggles in the trenches, I think that's an area where Kansas State can take an advantage of. Don't get me wrong, the Wildcats, Arizona, will hit a big player too, but Kansas State's defense and the ground game is going to take over with Johnson's legs and DJ Giddens at running back. I've got Kansas State actually covering this one here.
It's going to be a good game, and I know we talked about how there's part of us that don't like these conference, non-conference games, but I also like how it is kind of just a look in before the conference season starts. We'll get a good barometer on where these teams are at. And I mean, yeah, it's a ranked matchup. Both Friday night games, actually. We should have mentioned that. So clear your Friday plans, watch these games, and then tune into Friday Night Blitz. Watch me do some high school football after on Local 5. A huge rivalry game. One of these rivalry games that I would just love to go experience once in my life. It was an incredible atmosphere last year in Morgantown. I can imagine it'll be another great atmosphere in Pittsburgh. It's the Mountaineers at the Panthers. West Virginia favored by 2.5. The over-under is set at 60 flat. Where are you going, Derek?
The Big 12 needs to get revenge on Pitt after what they did to Cincinnati. That's for damn sure. The Mountaineers, they should be able to run the football right at them, and Pitt's offense shouldn't scare them at all for me. So I expect a heavy dose in this game of Garrett Green and CJ Donaldson. I'm taking West Virginia to cover the spread and eat shit, Pitt.
I'm going to take the under. Pitt really struggled to score on Cincinnati until late in that game. West Virginia, of course, struggled to score week 1 against Penn State. This game last year was 17-6. I think the rule of thumb is I tend to lean unders in rivalry games, more emotions. And more emotions typically lead to a little worse execution. I like the under in this game. But if I had to take a pick too, I think I'd take West Virginia on the road with what we saw last week out of Pitt. That's another rivalry game, a weird one that went to either double or triple overtime last year. Colorado goes on the road to Colorado State, which I believe is in the Springs up there. The Buffs are favored by 7.5. The over-under is set at 59.5. I'll go first on this one. It's in my betting rules on my phone. Like I have to live by those rules. Don't bet on Coach Prime. Give me the Rams plus 7.5, and I'm just going to do it blindly. I'm going to do it blindly until it burns me. I placed my largest wager of the season last week on Nebraska, and I regretted not going more. I'll take the Rams at home to cover 7.5 points.
This game is kind of like for me last year. I have no idea who's going to win. I think Colorado maybe will win, but I'm not confident in that at all. I could see this game getting into a shootout like they did last year in Boulder. I'm going to take the over in this one. It's over at 59.5. I think this is going to go into the 60s here. If Colorado loses this game, this could absolutely break the season for them. And if Dion hates negative questions from the media, he should avoid losing this game because this is one you don't want to lose. So I'm going to take the over. I'm not going to even pretend I know who's going to win this one. So I'm just going to take the over here.
It is worth noting, I think Colorado State lost by 60 to Texas, which half the country would probably lose by 60 to Texas at this point, but still. Another rivalry game. I tend to keep those a little closer. And I think Colorado's going to be fired up, but at this point, I just don't know if it matters. I don't know if they're good enough to beat any team on their schedule by 10 or more points.
No, that's Jake. That's totally fair on that one. And now for our Big 12 opener here, I guess you would say UCF going on the road to hit Fort Worth against TCU. The Horned Frogs are favored 1.5 by 1.5. The over under at 61.5. Final game of the pick here. Jake, where are you going?
I'm going to take UCF. TCU really struggled against the run last year. They especially struggled against running quarterbacks. Garrett Green ran all over them. Not exactly the guy you think of when you think of a dynamic runner. And of course, Avery Johnson ran over them as well. KJ Jefferson, we know what we think about his arm. He's one of those quarterbacks where if it's not there, he's probably just going to tuck and run. I think that could prove to be fatal for the Horned Frogs at home. And I think I trust UCF just more as a team at this point than I do TCU. Give me the 1.5 points, and we'll see maybe if I get lucky and TCU wins by 1.
We finally get a taste of real Big 12 action for the first time this season. I still have questions about TCU and how good they really are after watching them against Stanford. Will they be able to stop UCF's high-powered rushing attack and make KJ Jefferson beat them with his arms? I say they can't. Give me UCF in the money line in the close one. I'm taking the Knights, baby.
That's a lock. The money gun is back.
That's a lock.
So we're riding together on one play, I think, this week. So we'll be, and this is a night game, I believe, a 6 o'clock kick.
I think it is, yes.
So, yeah, we'll see. Maybe if you want some advice, maybe wait to tail me until I get a little bit of a rhythm behind me. It's weird. I know anybody can say this. As bad as my Big 12 picks have been, the actual money I've bet has been pretty good, which is not a common occurrence. I'm a very bad sports gambler. That's part of the fun of it. So that's why I do it responsibly. But
thanks to your picks this week or last week, I get to claim the title for this week, and I get my 30 seconds of fame here.
What you got?
This week, I didn't know what the hell to talk about, but one thing reminded me of the great Mike 𝗙cie was when Washington State and Texas Tech obviously played. I just want to say this and kind of just talk about 𝗙cie a little bit. You know, he was put into the Washington State Hall of Fame last weekend, and it just reminded me that he will not go into the College Football Hall of Fame because he is not eligible with his 59.6% win percentage because it's not 60%, which is the minimum. Well, the last time I checked, I am no mathematician, but 59.6 rounds up to 60%. And to its credit, he did it in places that very few people could win at. The man was not in Baton Rouge, Tuscaloosa, or Columbus, Ohio. He was in Lubbock, Pullman, and Starkville, Mississippi. Who else could do what he did at those three schools? I would guarantee you that there are coaches in the Hall of Fame right now that wouldn't have lasted more than 2 years at any of those schools. During the summer, the Hall of Fame president, Steve Mitchell, said he won't budge on the rules at 60%. He's going to leave it there. Well, Steve, if you don't put Mike in the Hall of Fame, you probably shouldn't be running it. Mike 𝗙cie changed the game of football with his offensive genius. In fact, you can't, Jake, you said this last week, I believe. You can't tell the story of college football without talking about Mike 𝗙cie. To me, that should put you in the Hall of Fame. So when the time comes for the committee, they should reconsider because without Mike 𝗙cie, the Hall of Fame is an absolute joke. Do the right damn thing, and when the time comes, put the man in the Hall of Fame. It's absolutely ridiculous that he is not going to be even eligible when the time comes. Just pitiful. That's my rant for the week. Yeah.
Drop the mic. Couldn't agree more. I got nothing to add to that. You can't tell the story of college football without Mike 𝗙cie. Just a total legend. And yeah, he plays a huge role into why this Big 12 conference is so fun to talk about every week. And we are so glad that we get to do it right here at Iowa Everywhere. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Be sure to like, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it. Leave a review. That helps too. And check out all the great content that this awesome, fantastic team is putting on at Iowa Everywhere. We'll see you next week on Bigger Than 12.